read each sentence and tell me whether it is clear. The subject is divine and undivine. What is divine and what is undivine? Then he has told you earlier that we are speaking of the gradation of consciousness, that the divine is there in matter and also in all the other planes of consciousness. Right in the beginning of Life Divine, he has said matter itself is divine. Not only is matter a fit housing for the Lord, but matter itself is divine. In other words, matter is not a house in which to live, but the house itself is made of divine material. It's like gold, okay? It's not a house built with bricks. It's a house built with divine gold. That's what he has told you right in the beginning. So now we are discussing, if that is so, then how do you explain what is divine and what is undivine? That's a good question. So now he is going to expand on that. Okay? The distinction between the divine and the undivine life is in fact identical with the root distinction between a life of knowledge, lived in the self-awareness and in the power of light, and a life of ignorance. At any rate, it so presents itself in a world that is slowly and with difficulty evolving out of an original inconscience. So, he is defining divine and undivine in this way. If you are in knowledge and you have power, okay, he has not mentioned bliss, but if you have power of the light, okay, power and knowledge, then you are divine, wherever you may be. And if you are in ignorance and no power, then it is undivine. So there is a relation. It's a very interesting definition because he is not telling you up and down. He is just telling you what is, when you are in knowledge, it is divine, and when you are in ignorance, it is undivine. Okay, that's the way he is describing.
Excuse me.
Yes, yes.
Excuse me. We
Tell me.
have already done this para. The next para, I had read it, but you said you will then go line by line.
Okay, so next one, not this one.
Yeah, it is not possible then.
Okay, because
no,
okay.
no.
Because
No, yes, Yasmin, you're forgetting. We have to discuss this paragraph. We can do it again. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I'll do it
Okay.
quick.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it quickly. Okay. So, the distinction. So he is telling you that when you are in knowledge, it is divine. When you are in ignorance, it is undivine. At any level. So it's an interesting definition, which does not say higher. It does not say highest and lowest. It says higher and lower. That's what is implicated. So that is all life that has still this inconscience for its base is stamped with the mark of a radical imperfection. Radical imperfection. However, take a glass of dirty water and go on pouring pure water into it. It becomes more and more pure, but still the dirt is there in it. It has not yet all gone away. So, radical imperfection is when the inconscient is having an effect. However much you come out, the inconscient is still dogging you. Okay. Man is definitely superior to the animal. So the animal is undivine compared to man, and man is undivine compared to the yogi, and the yogi is undivine compared to the supermind, supermental being. So that's how he is defining it. All life that has still this inconscience for its base is stamped with the mark of a radical imperfection. For even if it is satisfied with its own type, we did this, I remember. It's a satisfaction with something incomplete and inharmonious, because Mother defines the animal world as perfect in itself without comparison.
Yes, I also remember. I'm sorry. Actually, yesterday I had to, in between there was some.
Yes, we have done this. I remember now, because of that comparison thing. I remember. So Yasmin is right. So
Yasmin,
we won't
she
waste
was
time on this.
she
We have
remembers naturally. Sorry. Sorry,
Okay,
everybody.
no problem. We have all got our own short-term memories. Okay, so I'm reading the next one. It is not possible. What Jasmine read, she says. So I'm reading each sentence. Let's see whether it's clear. Okay, so in fact, we can do quickly since we are doing it. I'll just read out the summary of what he has said in the earlier one that we did. Okay, so then we'll get the continuity. The difference between this is I am reading. Okay, don't look for it in the text. The difference between divine and undivine can be said to be radically the same as between that of knowledge and ignorance, wherever it be. This is how it seems. 1 second. Yeah, this is how it seems to be in a world emerging from the inconscience of matter. All that emerges from inconscience is stamped with imperfection as long as inconscience is present in it. Even if each emerging stage is satisfied with its own status, there is still an imperfection and incompleteness and a lack of harmony. But life and mind could both be perfect if there was harmony of self-knowledge and self-power. All incompleteness and imperfection is a sign of the undivine. So we also spoke about the worlds which are in the involution. In the involution, when the divine is coming down, it is starting from knowledge. Therefore, there is a limitation, but there is no distortion and there is no degradation. Degradation in the sense of limitation is there, but they are quite okay in their own way when they come down. But when you are starting evolution, you are starting from darkness and inconscience and limitation. Therefore, it's a very slow progress because you have to go on seeing what is right, what is wrong, and then you have to slowly go up. So that is where all these problems come up. Okay. So, on the contrary, a divine life could be perfect at each stage if harmony would be the principle. At each stage with harmony, freedom and perfection, okay, at each stage with harmony, freedom and perfection would grow to their potential and develop their subtlest opulence. In the consideration of divine and undivine, we have to consider imperfection and incompleteness in all fields. Man usually overstresses good and evil, happiness and suffering. But we have to look also at the imperfection and incompleteness of knowledge, truth, beauty, power, unity, because these are also elements of the divine nature. Yeah, we did this very clearly, I remember, because we discussed that. Na? So in the involution, the worlds created are quite perfect within themselves. But when you are starting from the lower and going up, in fact, later on in the chapter of the origin of evil and suffering, he says that evil and suffering don't exist in the involutionary worlds, but they exist because you are starting from ignorance, you are likely to do wrong things. So therefore, evil and ignorance come in the evolutionary scale upwards, but not in the involutionary. Okay. Having said that, we will now go to the paragraph that we have to do today. I am reading each sentence. Tell me it's clear. It is not possible then to limit the description of our and the world's undivine imperfection solely to moral evil or sensational suffering. So, again we have to identify, it is not possible then to limit the description of our, which is the our, the individual, in man, okay? But also the world's undivine imperfection. There is imperfection also in the world, that also is saying. Okay. Matter is imperfect, life is imperfect, even the mind is imperfect at a universal level, not only in man but also there. Therefore, he says, you can't only consider moral evil and sensational suffering. Note the words moral evil. Okay. The word evil, when you are at the moral level of the mind, the question of evil comes up. When you are above the mind, the evil disappears. Okay? You see it in a totally different way. So note the word moral evil. Morality is limited to the mind. There is no morality in matter. There is no morality in the animal world. There is no morality in the vegetable world. But there is a morality in mind. And when you go above the mind, morality disappears. There is no good and bad. Okay? Everything is only gradations of the same substance. Or sensational suffering. Suffering can be sensational, and that is the one that man is most bothered about. But there can be vital suffering, there can be emotional suffering, there can even be a mental suffering. Okay? But there is no suffering in the higher spiritual planes of consciousness. There may be a limitation, but there is no suffering as such. In fact, that's the solution of the Buddhists. Go get out of your body, mind, life and go to the nirvana consciousness above the mind, and you will have no suffering at all. But they are saying reject therefore the body, mind, life, and so they are saying no, we won't do that. Okay, so that's a difference. So very clear, moral evil and sensational suffering. Right now, Srivendra is limiting it to only sensational suffering. Okay, so there is more in the world enigma than their double problem. Okay? Which is the double problem? Evil and suffering. Okay? Evil produces necessarily suffering, because when someone is doing something evil, it will produce suffering in the one who is being subjected to the evil. Therefore, it's a double. He is using the word double. And there is a world enigma. The world enigma is why is on earth is there this imperfection and this suffering? How can it be? On the one hand, we have said that Advaita philosophy we have started with. We have started with Advaita philosophy. Everything is divine. If everything is divine, how can there be undivine things in it? That's a world enigma. Then our double problem. The double problem also is clear. There is the suffering and there is the evil. For they are only two strong results of a common principle. Which is the common principle? The limitation of not only ananda, but knowledge, power, truth, beauty, power, unity. This is the common principle. The common principle is all these things are getting diminished. For they are only two strong results of a common principle. All these things are also getting reduced, but man is most vulnerable when he suffers. Therefore, he concentrates only on the suffering. In all those who object to the suffering in the world, they limit themselves to only suffering, but not so much to knowledge or power or truth. Okay? So that's why Srivendra is stressing that aspect. And he's saying that you have to consider also the other things. Everything is getting reduced. Right? It is the general principle of imperfection that we have to admit and to consider. Imperfection not only in morality, but also in knowledge, also in truth, and also in beauty, power, and unity. Even unity is a very big principle, because if unity is there, there cannot be any clash, there cannot be any disharmony. Unity promotes harmony. So that's why all these we have to see, and we have to focus now on the imperfection. It is the general principle of imperfection that we have to admit and to consider. So that is what we will examine in sense. If we look closely at this general imperfection, we shall see that it consists first of a limitation in us of the divine elements. Just 1 second. If we look closely at this general imperfection, we shall see that it consists first in a limitation in us, because we don't see. It is easier to see the limitation in ourselves, in man, than in the universe. Okay? Of the divine. When do you see these gradations in the universe? Only when you go to the higher level of consciousness. So naturally, when you are identified with your body, mind, life, you can see the limitation, you can see your own lack of power and lack of knowledge, you can see that. But you don't see it in the universe. Only when you go out of your body, mind, life, and you are in the higher levels of spiritual truth, then you see the universal limitations also. Because at that time, you see matter, vast, infinite matter, you see vast, infinite life, and you see vast, infinite mind principle. That time you see it in the universe, but not before that. So he's saying, if we look closely at this general imperfection, we shall see that it consists first in a limitation in us. He's not stressing the word, but we have to stress it. In us of the divine elements, which robs them of their divinity, then in a various, many branching distortion. So we look at the words distortion first, a perversion, a contrary turn, a falsifying departure from some ideal truth of being. So there is a limitation, number one. That limitation gives you a distortion and a perversion and a contrary turn. So the light that comes in, when it starts becoming less and less, it becomes also a perversion. It gets distorted first of all, and the distortion is explained in this way. You can explain distortion by, as I told you, when you're going from one medium to another medium, there's a distortion. Just like you put a stick in water, very stable, calm water, and you will feel that the stick is bent. Okay, but there is no bending actually. So this distortion that you see seems to be a distortion. And there is a perversion and a contrary turn, a falsifying departure from some ideal truth of being. When we look into ourselves, we see all these things. We see that I am incapable. I see that I am not able to understand certain things. I certainly don't understand rocket science, nor do I understand medical science unless I study it. So I know that I am limited in my understanding. So knowledge is limited. Power also is limited. I cannot lift up a 1-ton stone. So you see very clearly in yourself that there is no power and no knowledge. Okay, so you become quite aware of your limitations. That's what this. So, to our minds, which do not possess that truth, but can conceive of it, this departure presents itself either as a state from which we have lapsed spiritually, or a possibility or promise which we cannot fulfill, cannot realize, because it exists only as an ideal. So, what he's saying is very interesting. He's saying that when you look at yourself, you can see the limitations and also the distortions in yourself, but not in the universe as yet. And you can come to two conclusions. One, I have fallen from a state where I was perfect. I have faith in the divine and I must have come from there, but now I am in a very poor condition. So that is the first conclusion you can come. Or you can say that it is possible for me to rise again, okay, but I may not be able to do it. Cannot realize because it exists only as an idea. This is the materialist idea that it is impossible to go from here and improve your condition. The theory of existentialism also. You have to accept
Are
the
you
limits.
getting disturbed?
Pardon? You are getting distortion and disturbance?
No, sorry.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, now we have muted yourself. Okay. So, this is what he's saying, that we see these things, but since there are dualities and the mind is able to see the opposite, the dualities, the animal does not see dualities. So, therefore, there is no problem for the animal. It just lives its life very, very comfortably. It's not even sometimes you can say that it not even does not suffer its pain. If you see a dog which has been hit by a car and become lame, it just goes on hobbling and going. But whether it has got that self-pity, we don't know. Like human beings have, oh my God, I have become injured, and you look into yourself and you have self-pity. Animal doesn't have any self-pity because all its looks are going outwards. All its senses are directed outwards and not inwards. So, but in man, there is this inward look and you see the imperfections of yourself and you can conceive of the opposite. So, when you conceive of the opposite, again, two possibilities. One, oh, it's an ideal, it's impossible to reach there. The materialist idea as well as the existentialist idea. But if you are spiritually minded, you can say, no, maybe I should be able to get, there's a promise. I'm surely, if I have faith and God will help me, I can rise up. So two possibilities. That's what they're saying. Look carefully. Okay. To our minds, which do not possess the truth, but can conceive it. Okay. The animal can't conceive it, but we can conceive it. This departure presents itself as a state from which we have lapsed spiritually. Possibility number one. We were very high up, but now we have lost it. Or a possibility or promise which we cannot fulfill. That also you can come to that conclusion. Cannot realize because it exists only as an ideal. There has been either a lapse of the inner spirit from a greater consciousness and knowledge, delight, love and beauty, power and capacity, harmony and good, or else there is a failure of our struggling nature an importance to achieve what we instinctively see to be divine and desirable. So, either you see it as something in a very fallen condition, or you can also think of it as a stage in evolution. Okay, so there is either, he said they're using the word either, so it could be either this or that. Either a lapse of the inner spirit from a greater consciousness and knowledge, delight, love, beauty, power and capacity, harmony and good, or, because all these things are what you have to consider in the imperfection. Remember, he has told you that we will concentrate on the imperfection. So, or else there is a failure of our struggling nature, an importance to achieve what we instinctively see to be divine and desirable. This is the agnosticism. Okay, I admit maybe there is a God, but it's impossible to reach him. Or even if it is possible to reach him, I am not capable of reaching him. There are so many gradations of agnosticism. Either God doesn't exist, or even if he exists, he is eternally and permanently unknowable, or even if he is knowable, I can't do it. So these are all the possibilities for agnosticism. Then he's saying, if we penetrate to the cause of the fall or the failure, the fall is the first theory that we were divine and we have come down, or the failure is we are not succeeding in reaching our top. Okay, both he is playing on the word either. So here also he is sticking to that, the fall and the failure. We shall find that all proceeds from so one primal fact, that our being, consciousness, force, experience of things represent, not in their very self, but in their surface pragmatic nature, a principle or an effective phenomenon of division or rupture in the unity of the divine existence. So, when you look very carefully, okay, if you think that you are not capable, then there is nothing you can do about it. But if you believe that you were divine at one time, because you are sufficiently developed and you see that there are ideals in you, and you can conceive that I have fallen down from a condition which is very highest. Okay, then what do you see? You see that the cause of all this is division. There is a division. I am different from all the others in the universe. So the division is a very important, very important principle which causes ignorance and limitation and suffering. Division. And what is the division? When the one is becoming the many. Okay. See how interesting the positive things start taking on a negative nature at the lower level. So but they are all linked. The one becoming the many is essential for manifestation. If the one remains the many even below, there can be no manifestation. You don't see what are the possibilities in the one. So the one becoming the many, the problem of division comes up. Okay, so limitation. So that's what Sendhu is pointing out. If we penetrate to the cause of the fall or the failure, we shall find that all proceeds from one primal fact, that our being, consciousness, force, experience of things represent. I'll leave out the parenthetical phrase. Our primal fact that our being, consciousness, force, experience of things represent what? Represent a principle or an effective phenomenon of division or rupture in the unity of the divine existence. Note the word effective. The phenomenon produces a real effect in the physical world. Principle or an effective phenomenon of division or rupture in the unity of the divine existence. This division becomes, in its inevitable practical effect, note the word practical. When you are in the lower consciousness, you have to take into account that yes, it's a really a fact, okay, but it is not true at the deeper level. Its inevitable practical effect, a limitation of the divine consciousness and knowledge, a divine delight and beauty, divine power and capacity, the divine harmony and good. There is a limitation of completeness and wholeness, a blindness in our vision of these things, a lameness in our following of them, in our experience of them, a fragmentation, a limitation of power and intensity, a lowering of quality, the mark of a descent from spiritual heights, or else of a consciousness emerging from the insensible neutral monotone of the inconscience. Again, we look very carefully at the language. The intensities which are normal and natural on higher ranges are in us lost or toned down so as to harmonize with the blacks and greys of the material existence. We'll stop here. It's a huge sentence and we'll have to go step by step. This division, so when you look at it, you see that there's division. It's very obvious to the awakened soul, but to the non-awakened soul, it's very natural. I am myself, and Shilpa is what she is, and Sumki is what she is, and Archana is what she is. What is unnatural about it? Okay, you don't think of it that way. But if you are an awakened soul, you see that this division is creating a problem, because I can't understand others' thoughts, others' emotions. So then if you can't understand, there is likelihood of clash and disharmony. So the awakened soul realizes that there is a division is there, the main reason. A division, I can't understand the others. Okay, so that's what he's pointing out. This division becomes, in its inevitable practical effect, a limitation of the divine consciousness. Limitation of what? Now he is again listing, again and again he repeats. Limitation of consciousness, limitation of knowledge, limitation of delight, limitation of beauty, and power and capacity, and divine harmony and good. Okay? And what is being limited? There is a limitation of completeness and wholeness. The wholeness is gone. A blindness in our vision of these things. A blindness is the knowledge. The knowledge is not there in your vision. A lameness in our following of them. That's a power aspect. Blindness in vision is knowledge aspect. Lameness in our following of them is our incapacity and the lack of power. In our experience of them, a fragmentation, a division of power and intensity, a lowering of quality. A lowering of quality. All these things you see when you are in a slightly higher level of consciousness. You see that your thinking is not always right. You understand that you are not thinking in the right way. The mark of a descent from spiritual heights, or else of a consciousness emerging from the insensible neutral monotone. Now look, he is using the word or else. You remember in the beginning he has told you that there can be two things. I believe that I have come from above, but I have limited myself. Or I have started from the inconscient, that's the other aspect, you can come to that conclusion also. And therefore I am limited. So that's why Swami is now again, or else. The one that he has spoken about, the two, either this or that, he is continuing throughout the paragraph. So we have a tendency to neglect one and stress the other, but he is stressing both. Okay? This is what he is making. That it could be this, it could be that. If you are awakened, you will know that, oh, I was at a higher level of consciousness, therefore it is possible, and I have come from a divine source. I have experienced my higher consciousness and I know that I can go. But the other one who is starting with not experiencing other aspects of the ranges of higher consciousness, he thinks that it is impossible to rise. And it is because of my body is matter. My life also is full of all sorts of imperfections. So, or, note the word or else. Okay? So, either mark. So, what is the first possibility? Descent from spiritual heights. Or the other one, a consciousness emerging from the insensible neutral monotone of the inconscience. Now, look at the words insensible, neutral, monotone. What does it suggest? It suggests, first of all, there is no sensibility, there is no consciousness in the inconscience. Secondly, neutral. There is no good or bad in it, okay? It is neutral. And monotone. Monotone suggests oneness, okay? Wherever you see, there are no differences at all. So this is the description of the inconscience. It is insensible, no consciousness, neutral, no idea of good and bad, and monotone. It's absolutely one. That's an interesting thing, that the inconscience and the consciousness on top are They have a lot of common things. It's a very interesting one. That inconscience is infinite, consciousness is infinite. Super consciousness is infinite. One is the source of all things, the other also, the inconscient also is the source of all things. One is the source of involution and the other is the source of evolution above. Okay. Then on top it is one, unity. Below also it is one and unity. I refer you back to but there is a connection between the two because there is so much in common. I refer you to Mother's experience of in a New Year message, she gave that message. She says that I had the experience of the inconscient in a more stifling, okay, and narrow and hard. I had to go down into the inconscient with her consciousness, but from there, like a spring, she was hurled into the superconscious, vibrating with the seeds of a new world. In other words, there is a connection between the two. Okay, that is a very interesting New Year message that she gave. That she descends down into the highest, lowest. But from there, it is possible to go to the highest because they are essentially one. There are so many common things between them. Okay? So, and this is the interesting thing. All the dualities in the physical world are based on this. The divine can be power, but he can also be the opposite of power. He can be knowledge, but he can also be the opposite of knowledge. He can be consciousness, but he can be the opposite of consciousness. This is how the explanation of duality has also come up. We mustn't think that. Yes, tell me.
Can you explain more with the example that how means divine is like like mother has gone down in the lowest consciousness? So the examples of the lowest conscious, what are the lowest consciousness relationship with the higher consciousness? Can you give some more examples?
Okay. There are 3 or 4 things which are common, na? Okay. The highest consciousness is one. That you agree? There is nothing else. When the divine is there, he is only one. There is nothing else. Okay. But the matter is also one. Wherever you see, it's only matter. So oneness is there common to both. Okay. Then infinity. The superconscious also is infinite in a very subtle manner, and the matter also is infinite in a very gross manner.
Okay.
Agree? So that's the second common thing. So one is the infinite, the other also is the infinite. The first is the one, there's unity, and also at the bottom there is unity. Okay. Now the next one also is very interesting. It is a seed form in which all the possibilities are stored above. But it's the same below. It's a seed form. After all, is not matter producing life, producing mind, producing all the variety of things. That's what we see. So that's it. These 3 things are common to both. Okay. So there is essentially a oneness between them. They are very great. They are not opposites. They are opposites only in a very limited, superficial way. Okay. But they are both. Both are divine. Shilpa, you got the 3 points?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, means we have to see the same like the first line. We have to see everything positive and all existence.
Yes, that is Srim's view. Yeah. But remember one thing. Intellectually, it's okay. But if you at the physical level, he is using the word practical, effective. Okay. If you think at the normal level that a good man and a bad man, okay, a murderer and one who is helping others is the same, then you will be very mistaken. That's the whole we are discussing that chapter only, divine and undivine. In the middle planes, there is a divine element and an undivine element. So, as I keep repeating again and again, at each word, there are laws and there are characteristics that are restricted only to that plane. Okay. You can't apply those laws to the other levels of consciousness. All these levels of consciousness, Shiva speaks of 7. So each 7 levels of consciousness, the laws are different and the characteristics are different. You can't say, even in the physical world is like that. Na? The laws that are obtained in India are not the laws that are available, are applicable in England or in Sweden. They are not. Different laws. Okay. So this is what we have to keep in mind. Okay.
So how do we know that which law we have to implement? Because we don't know our own level, no?
That's ignorance, exactly. So we are starting from ignorance, and the solution to ignorance is yoga. That's exactly the point. Okay. But there are people, that's what Sendra is discussing here. There are people who say there is no possibility. I have started from the inconscious and I am limited to the inconscious. That's why Sendra is going on discussing or, either. Okay. It depends on man at which level he is, and he can take two views. One, I am divine essentially. The other, no, I am limited. Okay. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So, I get the insensible, neutral, monotone of the inconscience. Okay. So, I went into each one because he is giving you so much information through his words. Insensible, neutral, monotone of the inconscious. The intensities which are normal and natural on the higher ranges are in us lost or toned down so as to harmonize with the blacks and the greys of our material existence. That's a very interesting phrase. Let's look at what he's saying. When can you see the intensities which are normal and natural on higher ranges? You can't unless you are spiritually developed. When you are spiritually developed, okay, you go to the higher levels of consciousness, you suddenly see that your thoughts are pure, that there is no sense of enmity in you, there is no sense of incapacity in you, okay? You see the divine presence everywhere. So, when you come down again to your normal consciousness, the consciousness descends, again you are back in your old. Then you see the difference between the two. And then you understand that there's been a loss. Okay. But if you are living a normal life, you don't find any loss. You just think it's natural. Okay. That's what he's pointing out. So the intensities which are normal and natural on higher ranges, the higher ranges, you can say he's talking of this level 2, the spiritual planes of consciousness, are in us at the lower level, lost or toned down, because all human beings are not equally ignorant and all human beings are not equally incapacitated. They can have different levels of knowledge, different levels of power. Okay, so toned down. That's why he used the word toned down. Either they are lost or toned down, so as to harmonize with the blacks and the greys of our material existence. The black is at the lowest level, and the greys, the blacks start becoming greys when you put more and more white into it. So when you put more and more consciousness into your inconscience, the greys start coming up. At the highest level, the greys disappear into a whiteness. At the lowest level, black. Okay. So again, the question of gradation comes up. So when you are coming down from the white, slowly, it becomes smoky, hazy, grayish, and you come down into matter, total black. Okay. So the greys are all in the middle world between the inconscious and superconscious. Okay. So with the blacks and the greys of our material existence. There arises material existence, the lowest level. Okay. There arises too, by secondary ulterior effect, a perversion of these things. Okay. Now, secondary. What was the first one, if you remember? He has told you very clearly, division. Now, the division is going to bring in perversion. He has told you that there can be limitation, but no perversion. But there is now a perversion that comes in at the lower levels. Okay? A perversion of these higher states. In other words, truth can become falsehood. There can be a limitation. Truth becomes less true. But it doesn't become the opposite. But at our level, it can become an opposite. There is a secondary ulterior effect. Ulterior means last. Huh? What is ulterior? What does that mean? Ulterior? What is
It
the word?
means the ultimate. The ultimate.
Okay. So ultimate, last one. A perversion of these highest things. In our limited mentality, unconsciousness and wrong consciousness intervene. Okay. So it becomes the opposite. Ignorance covers our whole nature, and by the misapplication or misdirection of an imperfect will and knowledge, by automatic reactions of our diminished consciousness force and the inept poverty of our substance. Now note the word substance. He has introduced the word substance. This substance at the highest level is subtle. The substance at the lower level is dirty. It is gross. So light cannot come into that substance. We keep repeating that consciousness is substance. Okay, emotions are substance. Okay, and thoughts also are substance. But they are substance of different subtleties. Okay. By the misapplication or misdirection of an imperfect brilliant knowledge, automatic reactions of our diminished consciousness force and the inept poverty, inept, limited, very ineffective, inept poverty of our substance. Contradictions of the divine elements are formed. And what are those contradictions? Incapacity. Capacity becomes incapacity. Dynamism becomes inertia. Truth becomes falsehood. Errorlessness, if you want, becomes error. Ananda becomes pain and grief. Wrongdoing, discord, evil. Because of the gradation. Gradation of what? Not only Ananda, but also knowledge, of unity, of power, of harmony, of oneness. This is how he is explaining. There is too always, somewhere hidden in ourselves, nursed in our recesses, even when not overtly felt in the conscious nature, even when rejected by the parts of us which these things torture, an attachment to this experience of division, a clinging to the divided way of being which prevents the excision of these unhappinesses or their rejection and removal. In other words, what he's saying is that there is something in us which is attached to, which is clinging to all these wrong movements, because we are so used to it that attachment also comes in. Sounds very funny, but it's absolutely true. Okay, you can look at yourself and you will see that there's an unwillingness to change. Unwillingness to change. There's a comfort zone in which you are very comfortable. You don't want to change easily. Oh, if I change, there'll be so many problems. What is the point? I'm quite comfortable as I am. Okay, so this is a very interesting thing. And also, this unwillingness to change is something there's a positive aspect to it. As we keep discussing, everything that seems to be positive has a negative aspect in it, and everything that has got a negative aspect in it has got a positive aspect in it. So what is this unwillingness to change and stability in the imperfection? What is that? It's the principle of tamas. If tamas is not there, what will happen? It will become dynamism. It will go on change. Now, if all the forms in the physical world go on changing and don't remain stable, okay, tamas is the one that guarantees stability and non-change of form. Okay, so just imagine what will happen if the principle of inertia and tamas is not there. Even the form, the stones will start changing every second minute. Okay, and Shilpa is there, suddenly she'll become Sunki. Archanaji is there, she'll become suddenly Yasmin. So how can I deal with it? So the principle of steadiness and tamas is essential in the physical world for practical purposes. So that becomes a negative thing. You don't want to change. That gets translated, the universal principle of tamas gets translated psychologically into an unwillingness and an attachment to our limitations. That's what he's saying. How interesting, you can see that. Huh? So, he's saying a clinging to the divided way of being and prevents the excision of these unhappinesses. We are unhappy, but we want to be happy, yet we are unable to do it because there is a clinging to it. We are a divided being. We want to go above, but we are incapable because there is something in us which is pulling us back and saying, oh, let it be, let it be. Which prevents excision, cutting off of this unhappiness or their rejection and removal. There also he is using the word, very interesting, you can excise the unhappiness or you can reject them, or you can remove them. Each word has got different psychological connotations. Okay? For since the principle of consciousness force and Ananda is at the root of all manifestation, the consciousness force, Chit Shakti, Ananda at the highest level is the root. Okay? Nothing can endure if it has not a will in our nature, a sanction of the Purusha. Okay? Nothing can endure if it is not the will of our Purusha, a sanction of the Purusha, a sustained pleasure in some part of the being, even though it be a secret or a perverse pleasure, to keep it in continuance. So, in other words, the stability, he's used different words, but I used another one. The stability is willed by the divine. And the stability is good, because otherwise everything in the physical world will go on moving and changing. So you need, for practical life, you need forms to be stable. Okay, I am sitting at my table, and if the table starts becoming something else, then how will I do my practical work? But that in man prevents him from going up. That's exactly what we say. We'll stop here today. Sasendra has given you very clearly what he means by divine and undivine. There is a limitation at each level, and what is above is divine, and what is below is undivine. Okay, we stop here today, and we have to read from when we say. We'll take that up next week. When we, yeah, when
Merci beaucoup.
you have said when we see. Actually, it is not when we see, but when we say.
When we say.
Okay, it doesn't matter. There's no problem. Doesn't matter. No problem. Because we have the page number also. Okay, au revoir everybody. Have a nice day.